an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Immortal Great Souls, Book 1, Bastion, Chapters 20, 21, 22, and is it 23? Was 23 included? No, just up to 23. Y'all, Scorio is a madman. He's just like, I'm so sorry. I heard you say the word potent. I didn't hear the word before it. I think it was something like poison, but that's not important right now. What we're talking about is the after part where you said it was potent. That's the part. Bastion. Bruh. What good is potent if you are not alive? Bruh. Why are you like this? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Dan for commissioning this episode. And Ms. T is also here in the chat, along with Dan, and Ms. T is saying so much like Lyndon. And yeah, it was really, really giving like the Vipers. For those of you who read the Cradle series, that second book has got some venom going on. Venom. And it is a really, really similar sort of situation where it's like, well, we could do more, but that could kill you. And dude is literally like, so? I can't relate. Look, this is the thing, guys. This is the thing. Every time I read a book like this where somebody is just willing to push themselves to the point of nearly breaking, I could never. And you know what? There has been a long time of a great period of my life where I've been really judgmental of the fact that I wouldn't be willing to like go this far and that I should be. And you know what? I'm fine now. I have reached a point where I have realized people like this are fucked up. That's just all there is to it. I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm not saying that necessarily. They could be, but not, I'm just saying there's something wrong with them. And I am okay with not being that way. I'm just okay with it. I have come to terms with it. A part of me is curious to know what I could have accomplished had I been like this, but not enough. Just not enough. That's all there is to it. And the thing is, and this is something that recently I've been learning also, to my chagrin, is there is some avoiding reality here. Whenever you've got a character who pushes and pushes beyond the boundaries of what's really supposed to work, and it manages to work for them anyway, it is easy to think that everybody's warnings are just folks hand-wringing for no reason, and that the fact that this person got through it is evidence in and of itself that this isn't that dangerous to try. But the fact is, you can push yourself so hard that you just wind up doing damage that can't be undone, or it can be undone, but it will set you back such a great amount of time that it wasn't worth the attempt. And this is when I said that, like, this is something that I'm learning. So I've been starting running again, and I have been sedentary for like 2 years, basically, other than caring for the dogs. So I really had to start from scratch with intervals of like 30 seconds running, 2 minutes walking kind of thing. And you guys, there was a set like level to which you were meant to start accelerating, right? So you do like 2 weeks, 30 seconds running, 2 minutes walking. Then you jump to 45 seconds running and 2 minutes walking. And then you jump to a minute running and a minute 30 seconds walking. And you keep increasing the run and lowering the walking. But the thing is, we don't, as human beings, progress in a straight line. And it's really hard for people like me who like order and method to accept that. So I began to progress to the 1 minute run, even though the 45-second run was still quite challenging. But I wanted to stay on schedule. And I could not figure out why I wasn't progressing at all. And I was really frustrated because I was barely managing to get through those minute intervals. Sometimes I was having to stop early. And I kept thinking that if I just stuck with it, after a couple weeks, it would begin to grow. And it didn't grow easier. I wasn't getting better at it. I was struggling through every session, and every time I was done, I felt bummed out instead of energized and excited because I was so frustrated that I wasn't making progress like I wanted, like I expected. And then my coach told me, hey, I know you don't want to hear this, but you may need to drop back to 45-second runs and 2-minute walks for a while. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. You back off, and that actually helps your body accustom itself so that this becomes fun again. I resisted so much mentally, but I did what she said because she's the coach. When I tell you within 2 weeks, it became fun and my strides were longer, I was covering more distance in the same amount of time, and it would have been seen as backward progress to a lot of people. It would have been seen as sort of like giving up, I think, to a lot of folks. And it did to me as well. I struggled so much with agreeing to try that even. Because I just was like, I'm supposed to have reached this point. Supposed to, according to who? Somebody who just drew a chart up with no consideration for me as a person because it was a generalized chart for like just people at large. What do they care? Why do I need to stick to that? But I had this thing in my head. So anyway, all this to say that sometimes backing off and slowing down actually strengthens you in a different way. And you still get where you're going. And maybe it's not as fast, but maybe once you actually get there, you have a more solid foundation to work from. I am not trying to say this and criticize Scorio, okay? What I'm doing is I'm just reminding everybody out there who reads things with characters like this, who push and push and push incessantly, never ever give up, never ever take no for an answer. This is fiction. Human bodies don't really work like this. So if you feel like you are not giving it your all because you can't maintain this sort of pacing and this sort of single-minded focus and desire, that's okay. You're a full, rounded human being with other wants, desires, needs, and not a magical man with no family, no memories. Just take a step back and don't beat yourself up. And maybe I'm saying this to myself. It's possible, okay? But everybody just mind your own business. So, chapter 20 starts with neither Scorio nor Naomi mentioned the end of the stipulated week. I really, really do enjoy the fact that they just keep going. This is just like, we're not going to talk about it, but she's going to keep showing up. And when she does like continue to show up, she's sort of weird with like, you know, being short with him and kind of severe in a way that feels to me like she's just telling him in her body language to not bring it up, please, because she doesn't want to have to explain herself. Because she's just like that, isn't she? Ooh, sorry. I'm just seeing in the chat. Dan says, boy, oh boy, is pushing till you do long-term damage a thing here. That, or you end as someone like Michael Jordan, or you end up as someone like Michael Jordan and are a single-minded asshole your entire life because of that drive. Right. That's the thing, is like people who are like I said, I think there's something wrong with them. That doesn't mean that they are a bad person, but I think that's like, you know, just, it's not a great way to live from what I see. So he keeps continuing to like collect these plants, and he's trying to get enough to make one of these pills. And Naomi is consistently surprised at the fact that he is able to collect so many, and doesn't really understand why he's putting so much effort into something that is not going to pay off very much. She keeps like bringing it back to, I don't get this. You're just putting in way more effort than what you're getting out of it. And he says, so I simply shouldn't try? And she says, it's like I said, you're risking death every night for nothing. And I'm like, that's not what you said, though, is it, Naomi? She says at first the risk far outweighs the rewards. And then she says, you're risking death every night for nothing. You didn't say that to begin with. You added that after your conversation progressed a little bit, which just goes to show the mental, like, just the attitude that she's got going on right now is that if something isn't going to like send her leaps and bounds ahead, it feels pointless to her. And to a degree, when you're at a point that she is, I can understand that. But he is at such a base level with his abilities that anything is going to be starting to add up for something, you know? I do get like, and anybody I think who has played like a video game that can have ridiculously high levels that you can reach understands how that can be, though, where part of you wants to reach the next level because it is, you know, you unlock some ability that is so incredible, but the exponentially higher number of points in whatever areas that you would need to get, it feels like all the activity you do barely makes a dent in it, and it starts to get to like, are you willing to keep grinding to get there, or do you just want to play a different video game? You know what I'm saying? And, you know, it depends. It depends. But she has clearly reached a point where she's like, I'm put my controller down and I started playing a different game called Nightmare Lady. And that was, you know, not awesome, but it was going okay. So she tells him, like, at this point, all right, you know what? Let me go. And it's so funny. She says, we might as well go visit my friend. And I was really expecting there to be more of a connection there when they got there. She calls this person her friend. It doesn't even seem like they're acquaintances, really. It seems like she just called up and made an appointment like a regular. But at this point, you know, she is teaching him how to, again, pull the mana into his heart. And he does it. And it's a very difficult balance for him to hold. And he has to be like really conscious of it. And he asks, how close am I? And she says, closer. You could probably ignite now if you wanted the weakest heart out there. But you'll know when you've hit your absolute limit, when your body breaks out in soul fire. So basically, it's like the equivalent of like a sponge, where you can pour water on a sponge and it'll soak it up and it'll soak it up. And then there'll be a point where that sponge has like a sheen of water over the top because it has reached saturation and there's nowhere for that water to go. And it begins to like sit in a puddle because the water is pooling. And that's basically what soul fire is. It's like that mana has filled up and there's nowhere for it to go. And it burns on the exterior of your body, which is wild. And he brings up again those sapphire vials, asking like, is there any way I could convince you to give them back? And she's like, no. And he asks like, have you even used them yet? And she says she hasn't. And when he asks why not, she just says it's none of your business. And Scorio says, no, you stole it from me. I can't take it back, but you owe me the courtesy of telling me what you're going to do with it. And she never answers him. I just want to point this out. She says, I can still indulge in basic courtesy. If I'm to make the most use of the vials, I need to affirm my own commitment to my growth so that I don't waste it either. My goals. I have the talent, but not, as my father would say, the drive. Acquiring these vials has caused me to reconsider my options, but I need to be sure that I know what I want and why before I even dream of breaking it open. It might not help me become a tomb spark, but it could make all the difference when I press for Flame Vault. And there's some stuff later on about like some of the challenges that he's going to go through that she gets real cagey on. And I'm extremely interested about like in what that's going to look like. And if he reaches any of those challenges within this book. And then he says, I have a proposition for you. And she's like, you haven't got anything to offer me. And he says, you took my bridge and steel rod. Let's say they're still yours, but allow me to use them at night. That'll make my exploration of the ruins a much easier feat. Her eyes narrowed, but he thought he saw a flicker of guilt in their depths and knew that he had her. And she says, okay, you can borrow them, but by rights, they're mine. And he's like, what rights are those? And she's like, the rights of take what you want, and if they can't get it back, then it's yours. Like, what do you mean, what rights? The rights by which I currently have them, and you do not. I think it's very self-evident. So, there is a pretty funny little moment where he sees her the next morning, and she tells him, like, I think that there is enough for us to go to the apothecary. And when he responds like, oh, nice. All right, let's go. She's like, well, I thought we might do some meditation first. A smile cracked her facade, and she held up a hand to silence his protest. I jest. See, I too know how to do humor. It's not, I mean, one doesn't do humor. Naomi arched an eyebrow. I mean, you're doing it perfectly, said Scorio. See? That was a laugh. Now, shall we? I do really enjoy whenever somebody, like, whenever there's a character that's trying to, like, get what, because let's be honest, what's funny is sort of, like, difficult to pin down sometimes. What makes one thing funnier than another, and it can be very subtle. The difference in inflection when you say a word or choosing one word over another. And so I actually deeply relate to people who sort of look at humor from a distance and are like, here is something that I'm going to attempt to accomplish. Like, why not approach it that way? As if it's sort of a formula, you know? It's a start. It's a place to start. I'm just saying. So he brings a sample with him, and they head on over to this really bizarre little shop that is described as so irregularly shaped, it appeared more like an overlooked interstice that someone had taken advantage of than an established commercial spot. Which I do really like the idea of that. You know, that there's just this sort of like weird between, maybe an alley, and somebody just began to sell stuff, and it slowly took over the alley until eventually they installed a roof and, walls, and people were just like, yeah, no, that's always been there. That's part of the building. A small counter only 3 steps away from the doorway served a variety of purposes. A third was dedicated to bookkeeping, complete with a pile of neatly tied-off scrolls and a ledger. A third held a number of glass containers with seamlessly fitting lids, each holding a different kind of flour or substance, each but vaguely visible through the dim glass, while the far side appeared a small but efficient space for the actual practice of alchemy, complete with esoteric equipment, a small cutting board, mortar and pestle, and neat bundles of dried herbs. Sounds delightful. So he comes in with Naomi and this person behind the counter, who is described as dark-skinned with a shaved upper lip and protruding ears, hair lacquered and combed back severely. You guys, I was trying so hard to picture this guy, and all I kept coming up with was, for some reason, Barack Obama. And I don't know where that kept coming from, but that was what happened, and I'm just going to tell you the truth about it. You know, it says his dark face, and Barack Obama is not dark skinned, so I don't know why, but I think it was maybe the protruding ears. I think that might have been a big part of it. But anyway, he is described as looking at them with, quote, violent disinterest, which is very funny to me. I like that phrasing. And the first thing he asks is simply, what rhymes with dangerous? Scorio stopped, uncertain, and glanced at Naomi. Dangerous? She frowned. Nothing is coming to mind. Scorio? He blinked nonplussed, then slowly shook his head. The man took up the parchment on which he'd been writing and recited in a dull voice, "For even by the light of day your beauty is most dangerous, but I, being true in phases, all doth something, then whatever rhymes with dangerous." Yes, said Naomi. It has promise. And he says, romance, when distilled by a passionate heart, precipitates into poetry. Sir, does it? It's okay if it doesn't. I'm just saying, it feels like it's not. If you have a passionate heart and you're experiencing romance and it's just precipitating into wishing you could write poetry, that's okay. I don't know about all this. It may just not be for you. That's all I'm saying. He ends with, I didn't think it would be this demanding. So his name is Master Jalan. And Scorio very quickly tries this man's patience. So he first says, I'm collecting these plants so that we can begin to make the pills ourselves. And I wanted to understand the process. And he says the process is slow but dangerous. The easiest way to extract mana from the plant is to simmer it over low heat for some 12 hours, then add alum to clarify the tincture to remove the solids. And then, this is where he fucks up. I would rather not word spread that my clients are poisoning themselves in pursuit of potency. Scorio raised a hand. Wait, if it remains poisonous, it's more potent? Jalan's eyes narrowed. That's both not what I said and not what I would advise. Scorio inched closer. But you didn't say I was wrong. Am I understanding correctly? Neutralizing the poison reduces the potency? And I'm going to be honest, guys, when he said I would rather word not spread that my clients are poisoning themselves in pursuit of potency, it didn't even occur to me that was what he meant. This felt a little bit like the author wanting Scorio to come to a certain conclusion, and so he writes in this line in a way that, to me, does not draw attention at all, and wouldn't, more than likely, except for the fact that our main character had to notice so that he could ask, or else this guy would not have been willing to share that information. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it just, to me, what it came across as was simply people who are looking for power could poison themselves if they did this wrong. That's all I heard. Not that, like, they're going to try and become more potent and so poison themselves, because that the conclusion that Scorio jumps to here felt unearned to me. And I get that we just kind of want to get here with him, but it just was a bit, Miss T says, just a bit of a cheat. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And then he says, if I don't drink enough to kill me, what happens? And he says, you'll be violently ill for a few days, retch till you're out of bile, and hallucinate visions that will make your nightmares appear paltry. Was anybody else a little disappointed after that declaration with how easy it seemed for Scorio to get through this? I was really expecting a journey, that we were going to be inside his head when he was going through this, and it was going to be a whole thing. And instead, it's just there's some descriptions of the pain in general, of the cramping of his stomach and wanting to drink anyway, but there isn't that. When I think hallucinations, I'm thinking a sort of dream-like, I'm trying to think of the words I want. Something that feels sort of over the top. And we didn't really get that. So I was really expecting it to be much more of a production. And it actually goes quite smoothly and doesn't seem like it was even that bad to suffer through. So, okay, eventually there comes a point where he just doesn't want to tell Scorio how much more potent it would be. And Scorio has to basically be like, look, dude, I'm a grown-up. I am responsible for my own actions. Just give me the information and I will do with it what I will. And it's not like you're going to be responsible for me. Just tell me what I'm asking, basically. Which is fair, I think. And he says there are several variables, but in short, an unfiltered elixir is about 20 times more powerful than the pill and requires half as many plants to make. The poison is simply the reaction of your system to consuming raw, unfiltered coal mana. You'd be lucky to not die as the raw mana tore its way through your heart. And if I didn't die, his stare was direct and disapproving. You've already decided to do it, haven't you? This is purely academic, I assure you. Then, academically speaking, I would advise the following. The first time you make it, reduce the tincture with enough alum to make it safe to drink. Each time thereafter, make it a little more potent so that you can determine your threshold. Scorio frowned but nodded. Fine, as long as it's not too weak. Jalam laughed, then sounded bitterly amused. When you're begging for death, I hope you remember those words. If that is to be the case, you won't need the 50 plants. 25 would suffice for an elixir of equal strength to a pill. And then he says, so I'm curious. Coal mana is intangible, but a great soul can draw it into his igneous heart through willpower and mastery of spirit. But how does a black star do the same thing? Do they have igneous hearts? And he's really delighted, Jalan, with oh, you're asking genuine questions now. Okay, so. And he pulls out a scroll, a treatise on black star flower cultivation. And at first, Scorio's trying to just open it up. And this dude is like, no. You don't get to just fucking read it and hand it back to me and be like, hey, thanks for all that information. This isn't a goddamn library. You buy it, and then you can look at it. And he explains that the coal mana is the only one that reaches Bastion easily. For some reason, all the different types of mana are limited by distance. He says silver mana can travel farther than gold, but not as far as bronze. There are many theories as to why, but the fact remains. Inscribed within the heart of the flower is a unique pattern that is edged with hardened coal mana. This pattern draws the coal mana along its course, and by some unknown mechanism, tricks the mana into thinking it has traveled a greater distance. Even coal, it seems, cannot travel forever. Upon reaching the end of the pattern, it coalesces into a dewdrop of pure mana, which feeds the plant. And, of course, Scorio is then like, all right, so can you just draw that pattern out in larger form? And Jalan is like, it says his smile was cold and patronizing. And when he continues to speak, it's very clear that, like, Scorio is over here with the most basic concept, really thinking that he thought up something new. Like, this wasn't the thing everybody and their mother already does. And he says, people do not have the skill to draw the pattern finely. At best, we have been able to approximate its intricacies only crudely, resulting in vastly inefficient traps. That's fascinating. And eventually, Naomi chimes in that it's easier to tap the trees in the forests that capture mana. Apparently, these trees suck mana up and then we'll just pour it out of a spile like fucking sap, which is wild. And he starts to ask about cultivating black stars and whether that would, and, you know, Jalon is basically saying the exact same thing that Naomi has been saying, which is it would be a huge pain in the ass for very, very little back. It just would not be worth it. So eventually, Naomi agrees to do this. She is going to fund it, and she already has a lot of the equipment. I love, she explained most grudgingly that she had a passing interest in alchemy. It helped, she said defensively, to pass the time. It's just funny to me that she feels like she needs to rationalize or explain why she has any interest in anything. It's fine. You get to know and do things. Why are you embarrassed about it or whatever? It's not a big deal. But finally, she has enough of this tincture. And he's ready to just down it and sit down and start his thing there. And she's like, no. We got to go someplace where the mana is a lot more dense than it is here. And she says, first of all, you're going to pull as much of this ambient coal mana into your heart as you can. Only once you're at your brim will you drink this poison. Oh, wait. Then, no, it's not a good idea. Her smile was predatory once more. But I'm curious as to just how deep your heart is, how much it can hold. I've a hunch you'll be fine. But as they say, if you're going to get whipped, might as well ask for a flaying. That's not the most comforting expression I've ever heard. Luckily for you, I'm not here to comfort you. So he goes ahead and draws it in and manages to actually pull it into his heart this time. And at first it's difficult, starts to get easier and easier. And then she has the flask right up against his lips and she's like, all right, keep on, and then drink all of this. And let's see. Where's the spot where I'm sorry, I'm trying to find this. Okay. Waves of fire rolled through Scorio, driving his thoughts before them, extinguishing his sense of self, his sense of body. Time lost meaning, and all he could do was cling to a spar of consciousness that was knocked spinning about within the eddies and vortices of the coal mana that raged through him. Dan says, I don't know, vomit till you ran out of bile brought up memories of having the Norwalk virus and sleeping in front of a toilet. Seemed bad to me. Dan, I'm not saying it wasn't bad. I was just saying that because it was described as that he would get a lot of hallucinations, I was just thinking it might be a little bit more fun, I guess, you know? But yeah, this whole, like, eventually he comes out of it, and Naomi says, there you are, and somehow still alive. And when he goes to get some water and lifts his hands, he sees that weird fire, like, across his skin, and is just like, oh shit, did I ignite? And she's like, not yet, but you're at saturation. So all we need to do is apply a tiny bit of tension, and it's going to happen. We're going to go through our standard strike and block drill. So they begin, and it's really hard. He describes it as feeling like he's drunk almost. And yet everything is so automatic because they've been doing it so consistently that he is able to keep up. And she's really zeroed in on him as he keeps going. She said something, but he couldn't understand the words. He was burning, the roar overwhelming everything, drinking in the world. Her first blow slipped past his defenses and cracked across his chin. Scorio didn't let it distract him. If he lost the rhythm, he'd be buffeted by a dozen more in quick succession. Parried the next 3, then the 4th slipped through, and her uppercut caught him in the chest. He staggered, but felt nothing. His hands flew up again, but his defenses were increasingly ragged, falling apart before her tenacious onslaught, an attack that only grew faster, peeling him apart, battering his arms away, pounding him again and again with her blows. And then his heart was there, before him, laid over Naomi, and he felt it before it happened, had a second's premonition to prepare himself before the insubstantial flames that wreathed his stone went woof, and the whole world changed. And then all of a sudden, he's feeling stronger, his aches and pains are gone, his vision clears up, his muscles swell up, and he has just leveled up and is able to keep up with her to a point that he was not able to before. And they, she really lets him go for a while before she stops him and is like, okay, that's enough. You fucking did it. And he's like, you didn't tell me how amazing I was going to feel after I accomplished this. And she's like, well, you didn't need the encouragement. You were already so determined. Let it be a little bit of a surprise, And I love that the revelation of what dark vision is a little bit of a disappointment for him. Because that's sort of, I think, what happens. You manage to break through to another level when you're training on anything. And even though you know that you're better than you were, that this is a big moment that you managed to do this, it's just still not quite. So he does the dark vision thing, and he just really thought it would be, I thought I could see as well as if it were in the daylight. But instead, it's like a spotlight somehow. And she says, it'll get easier as you level up, but at the moment, you just got to take what you can get. So she says, but you're still just a cinder, even if you feel like a pyre lord, so don't get carried away. So they have a little bit of playtime here where she takes her lantern and blows it out. And she just begins to climb up this rock wall, and he has to keep up with her and be able to see. And she's ahead of him, and he's managing to stay right behind her pretty consistently until all of a sudden his heart guttered and died. The strength flowed right out of him. His legs grew jellied, and he stumbled and crashed down to his knees, heaving for breath, black spots dancing before his eyes. And she's like, ooh, finally. I really didn't expect you to last for that long. But yeah, this is what happens when you completely drain your heart of all power. You burn through your reserves. You don't have a lot as a cinder. And even though you've got a deeper heart than most, this is something that I knew if I just tried to explain to you what would happen, you wouldn't listen to me. So I needed you to just go ahead and do it so that you could see for yourself how it feels. This is what happens when you burn through all your mana heedlessly. When you drain it dry like you did, you expend some of your heart itself. Now listen up, because this is important. Your power comes from the divine combination of heart, mana, and tension. You suffuse your heart with mana, then spark it to life with tension. But in extreme situations, if you run out of mana, you can choose to purely burn your heart. Wait, you just let me do that? No, she said, feigning tender care as she crouched before him and patted his cheek. You're still too ignorant to know how to do that on purpose. What you're feeling is the shadow of what that would actually feel like. You slammed into your heart's reserves instead of actually burning them. But here's the crux of the warning. Burning your heart gives you power at the the expense of your sense of self. Tremendous power, but, and they drum this into everyone at the Academy over and over again, that power is fueled by your nature, your personality, and everything that makes you you. So what's the moral of the story? Don't do it. Don't do it. Though I know you will. And I was like, yeah, he definitely will. Like, that's happening. At some point. That might even be how he wound up where he did, you know? So this, I'm realizing like how far into time I am, but I really felt like all of the stuff surrounding the way the magic works in these first couple chapters was really important enough to talk about in detail, because I just think it's probably going to come up later, so I would want to touch on it at this point. And of course, he is instantly like, okay, now I've reached Cinder, so what's next? And she's just like, dude, oh my God, you are going to burn yourself out. You have got to calm down a little bit. And also, if you like try and get other people to help you with all of this, it's going to draw some attention, and I'm not really sure if you want to do that. And he says, can't I just drink more Black Star tinctures? Sure, but I won't be sitting around each time to make sure you don't choke on your vomit, and the raw nature of the tincture will wear at the structure of your heart. Using coal mana already develops brute strength at the expense of finesse, but drinking tinctures will make you a raging beast without any self-control. And again, he has this moment of trying to act like, I have no choice but to do this. And she's like, you do. You keep saying you don't, but you fucking do. And he calls that semantics. I'm like, no, she's flat out denying your statement. That's not semantics. That's her being like, you are straight up lying to yourself and to me. Stop it. And it turns out, once you've deepened your heart as far as you can take it or are willing to take it, you'll have to ignite it with a special sense of purpose, and that will take you to the trial room. The same gauntlet. I never thought that there would be something that would like force him back into that place. And I really want to know what they would do. Like, is there a way to avoid that? And if not, can he go through it without actually like being spotted? Like, how, a lot of questions. And eventually she says, if you pass the trial within, you'll emerge an Emberling and manifest your first true power. And he asks what that is, and she won't tell him. And she says, on some level, the power you manifest captures something essential about who you are. And no, I don't want to hear you puzzling out what my power says about me. Do that thinking on your own time. Can you tell me anything else? What was your trial like? No. My trial is my own business, and telling you will only artificially influence your own trial. Believe me, you're best served entering it without preconceptions. Great. You're welcome. So, let's see. How far did you get the first time you ran the gauntlet? I never did. As an interloper, I was promised a chance, but they kept finding reasons to deny me. What? Why? One of the many reasons that led me to quit. Every time I hear about this, I'm just like, man, there was nobody on her side. Like, that just really fucking sucks. I hate this for her. Take the day off. Rest, eat as much as you can. Sure, rest and food. Got it. He does not do that. He brushed the worst of the dust away from his robes, tightened his belt, and set off toward his room to grab a quick meal before heading for the civilized border of Bastion. So, guys, I don't know if there is a point in this that I missed or earlier that I somehow missed where he found out where the two, Freyja, is that her name? I always forget her name, and Helena, where they are now. But he like seems to head for them in a fashion that seems extremely purposeful. Like he knows where he's going and where they're going to be without any question. And I feel like I must have forgotten something. But we get some of him just walking through the city and the descriptions of it. I won't get into that, but I did find it really well done and fascinating. And the ways in which, like, the architecture, the fashion changes depending on the neighborhood that you're in, the overall vibe of everything, of course, you know. He goes up to this old lady asking, how do I get to Ward 11? And she has her guard explain to him, and this guy is, like, clearly stoned, whatever this thing is that turns his teeth red. And he's like, wow, if you're going to 11, like, that's going to be a difficult time for you, but who am I to stand in the way of fate? Eventually, Scorio comes across this busker who is playing an oud. And his name is, he calls himself Old Mimic. Old Mimic has done caterwauling for Ox tonight. I will take you to the flame. And if your claims are true, perhaps I will gain admittance as well. And I really do like Old Mimic. I'm hoping, despite the fact that Scorio leaves this place without him, that we run into him again. Because he seems delightful. He's got a real storyteller sort of vibe that is like kind of giving Usopp from One Piece. And he seems like good-natured, but not necessarily super brave. And overall, just like a fun guy to have around. You know, definitely a person that you'd be invited to parties and stuff. And as they continue on, they get to the flame, and there is this bouncer outside who doesn't even look at Scorio and just tells him to get to the back of the line. And when Scorio keeps pressing, eventually he's like, I'm going to toss you in the fucking canal if you don't do what the fuck I just said. And Scorio's like, oh, bet, the canal, and tosses the guy into it himself. And I could not help but be like, Scorio, there are so many ways that you could have handled this, sir. You had to pick the most dramatic thing. And like, it's not even like Scorio is so angry that he's overcome with wrath. It's not. Scorio is just like, this'll be fun. And just does it with like a grin. You know, guys, I think a lot about how I would be if I were suddenly granted with certain powers and abilities. And I feel like I might have a moment or two like this. I might, you know. It depends where I am. It would really depend on like how likely it is that shit would come back on me. How many people around me have their phones out is another question. But man, you just didn't have to do this, sir. But he just, it seems like, is always going to take it to 11 whenever he can. So they go inside, and there is all of this black light and people painted up and in their bright like outfits and stuff that are glowing. And it is quite packed, this place. And here it is. Fan sat at a recessed booth amongst a half dozen others, sandaled foot up on the table's edge, a cup of something in one hand, watching the musicians. The upper half of her face painted a blinding crimson which glowed like artificial blood, a black band crossing narrowly over her eyes. And she sees Scorio. It takes her a second to like clock who he is. And finally, when she does, she's so pissed. And she drags him into the other room along with, what is his name? Mehmet. And it's just like, the fuck are you doing here? Mehmet, that's his name. And I love when they start to make a deal, and she's like, is he part of this deal? And poor Mehmet's like, no, I'm just a casualty of his ambition, which I feel like is a thing a lot of people around Scorio have said in the past and will say in the future. I just think that's probably going to be a vibe for this man for the future ongoing. And he asks her in exchange for another one of those friggin' starfire stones. I can't remember what they're called, but sunfire. There it is, sunfire. She won't agree for just one, too. He has to agree to give her two, even though it's unlikely to her that he would even be able to get his hand on a second one. I am very interested. I'm assuming he's going to go back underground for a little bit to get these. What it's going to look like for him to be in that place with the powers that he now has. Like, is it going to be easier, or is it going to seem easier at first, and the more he pushes, the more he runs into things that can't quite keep up with him, you know, or that he can't quite keep up with. Sorry. But anyway, the first thing is he wants to get in touch with members of the academy. And he's like, do you think that there's a way for me to get inside? And she says, oh, you don't even need to get inside, because there's a market that on every 8th day they come out and they have spending money, and you just have to keep your eye out and you'll find the person. And he's like, okay, well, what market? And she's like, you haven't given me the money yet, so we'll make that deal later. And then the second one is, smuggle myself and another out of Bastion and onto the Raskor plains. Her bark rang off the walls. I gave up exactly those kinds of connections when I decided to make this my life. No. 2 sunfires. Her eyes narrowed. You can't get that many. Say I could. Would you help? For 2? Perhaps. Then you start looking into it and I'll start collecting them. Give me one first, and then I'll start turning over old stones. Fair enough. And the market? Easy enough. The academy is in Ward 7 and a stone's throw from the graveyard. Every 8th day, the place turns into a circus. You can't miss it. And he tells her, you and Helena have done well for yourselves. And she seems to sort of take this as him making a point about the fact that they have all of this because of his sunfire. It's unclear to me if he meant it that way, but that's how she takes it. And she tells him, like, I am grateful, but if you fuck it up by leading Dola to us, I will just absolutely end you. So, you know, thanks for this and all, but if you ruin it, like, I don't fucking like you enough to not take it out on you. And eventually he agrees that he's going to leave and says, tell Helena I said hello. And she just says, no. Fine. Scorio took a deep breath, tugged on the hem of his robe, and inclined his head respectfully. Thank you, Phaon, and apologies for the inconvenience. And he tries to give Mehmek a little bit of an in, and it's like, give him a chance to play. He really is good with that oud. And she just says, goodbye, Scorio. And I have got to say, you guys, I am really hoping that Mehmek gets a chance to play it. I'm just saying. I feel like it would be very fun if it turned out like he was embraced and brought into the band somehow. Because there's a number of them. I think he said there's like 10 people on stage or something like that. And the oud, I just wanted to mention what this is. The oud is a Middle Eastern short-necked lute-type, pear-shaped, fretless stringed instrument, usually with 11 strings grouped in 6 courses, but some models have 5 or 7 courses with 10 or 13 strings respectively. And I don't know if that's helpful, because that was difficult for me to picture, but I just thought I would read it out loud, because like I knew it was a stringed instrument, but I didn't like the size of it and everything. I think I kept imagining that it was a sitar. So yeah, just wanted to let y'all know what that is all about. Scorio began to make his way back home. Now with some concrete information at hand, he felt unsure. Would Leonis and Lianshi remember him half as fondly as he did them? Would they risk their own careers as great souls by speaking with him? What would he do if they turned him away? And we haven't had a base touch with Leonis, but Lianshi we have, and we know that she's thinking about him a lot. So I'm pleased and confident about that. Leonis, even though we haven't touched base with him, his whole personality just very much felt like, yeah, this is a dude who's going to have your back for the foreseeable future. I'm trying to remember what the name of the other girl was in their group who got killed right away. And I don't know if that's something that I need to be worried about or if she would want to be part of their little grouping. She just, we've got so little time to get to know her. So I don't really consider her like a factor at all. And I feel a bit guilty about that. The fact that she just isn't any part of my consideration. Do you know what I mean? But that, and I'm also just, if he comes across them in the market, I'm assuming that, he'll be in enough of a disguise that nobody will spot him, notice who he is. I don't really know, because this is something that has not been made totally clear. Do people with igneous hearts, like other great souls, can they recognize each other due to proximity? Can they sense one another's power? I know that they can sense the mana in the air being drained. So you can tell that it's being taken because somebody is using it. Like, you can make that inference. But it's not, I'm assuming, like radar, basically, where you get close to somebody else who has one and it just, sensors start going off and you're like, another heart. And, that's my assumption. Because if there is a way for people to sort of sense him, and if there is a way for them to notice that his soul is made up of mostly, well, not his soul is made up of coal mana, but you know what I'm saying? That, like, clearly he's built different somehow. I just wonder if that will attract anybody's attention. But Dan says cinders are like ants, a little hard to notice. Okay, that makes sense. But yeah, so I really liked these chapters. I really liked Mehmek a lot. I definitely understand why Feyan is so upset with him as they've gotten to this place that's like seeming pretty happy and comfortable, and he turns up again. And I do sort of wish that Scorio had considered that when throwing the bouncer into the canal. Maybe this would draw some attention. But I wish Helena had seen him. I wish that there had been a way to pull her into the conversation, because the fact that Feyan doesn't even want to tell her he was here, that makes sense to me. I wouldn't either if I were her and I had the same goals that she clearly does. And that's why I wish that he had gotten to talk to her. She's the soft touch. All right. I have to wrap this one up, but this was really fun. Thank you guys again so much for joining me, for listening. Thank you, Dan, for commissioning this one. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.